So, hello everyone. We're absolutely thrilled to have you join us today for this really exciting webinar. We are here today to celebrate the launch of our collaborative position paper on AI in transforming medical affairs. The position paper that we've created offers a real practical guidance on integrating AI into medical affairs. It focuses on the strategies for the selection and implementation of AI projects whilst maintaining quality and compliance and building skills within your teams and managing those organizational changes. We're absolutely delighted that so many AI enthusiasts can be with us today from across the globe, and we already have well over 100 people on the call today. So it's great that you can be with us this afternoon. Just to let you know, this is being recorded, so if you want to come back later and listen to the discussion again, we will make the recording available through our associations and through LinkedIn in the coming days. You'll also then be able to share it with your colleagues that haven't been able to join with us today. So the aim of this webinar really is to mark the launch of our position paper, but it's also to give you, our audience, the chance to hear directly from the authors about the journey behind the creation of this position paper. And it's been several months in development. So we're excited that we're finally at a position to launch it and discuss it here today. You'll discover the benefits of implementing the recommended AI strategies effectively within your organisation. However, the primary focus today really is to give you the opportunity to pose questions, and the challenging the better, to the authors of this position paper. So really, let's get going. So obviously we want you to ask us questions. We don't want to just stand here or sit here talking to you today. We want to answer the key questions. So at the top of the screen, you will see a Q&A tab. Please feel free to click on that and submit your questions. And as we go through, we will be able to ask those questions to the appropriate panel member. Okay, so please type as many as you want and or comment on questions that people have already posed if you feel you want to add something to it, or just generally comment on it. So that's the purpose of the webinar today, and you're probably wondering who I am actually. So I'm just going to introduce myself and the panelists today quickly. So my name is Helen Surrey. I'm a medical information professional with over 20 years experience working within pharmaceuticals across various medical affairs functions, but have a real passion for medical information. In addition to this, I'm also the communications lead at MILE, which is Medical Information Leaders in Europe. The first of our speakers is Michelle Bryden-Baker. She serves as Vice President of MILE as well. She's also the Head of Global Medical Information for Recordati Rare Diseases, and also the Chief Operating Officer at Unbiased Science. So we're very lucky to have her with us today because she's a very, very busy lady. In addition to all of those job titles, she has 2 decades of experience in both healthcare, pharma, and biotech. And she is a key speaker about medical communication and digital innovation. Next speaker is Dr. Samuel Dyer. He is the CEO and Chairman of the Board of the MSL Society. He has over 25 years of international MSL experience and has managed MSL teams and operations in more than 60 countries. So there is nothing that Samuel doesn't know about the MSL function. He's also led the design and conduct of over 200 global surveys, which have included research into AI in the field of medical affairs. And quite a lot of his work is actually included in the paper. So he's one of the key authorities, and hence why he's part of this paper and our discussion. And last, but by no means least, we have Meena Amiri. Dr. Meena Amiri is the Managing Director of AVAYL. She's also a medical doctor by training and a former pharmaceutical manager. Leading a technology-first company, she combines both industry expertise with pioneering technology. and she holds a PhD in medical psychology. So as you can see, we have a very distinguished panel of authors, in addition to being, present here on the webinar today. In addition, I'd just like to acknowledge that Factor also were a part of the review of this paper, as well as Dr. Tom Falls. So what I'm going to do is ask each of our speakers to introduce their work and ask the initial question. So I'm going to open up the question to Michelle to introduce Mile and their work and why this position paper was first started.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thanks for everybody for joining us today. I serve with Helen as the Vice President of the Medical Information Leaders of Europe, or MILE. And I had the distinct honor quite some time ago to participate in an advisory board on AI, particularly in medical affairs. And when we went around the table, like we really were all kind of wondering what projects we'd worked on. Some of us shared our best practices. And it was kind of one of the first forums where we kind of had that one-to-one amongst different leaders within industry, in medical affairs, kind of talking about this, talking about the challenges, and kind of being really forthright and explaining how, really nervous a lot of people were about implementing AI, especially in med affairs. And I think some real vulnerability and honesty about the fact that people did not feel that they had the skills necessary to move forward with AI. And so I think we kind of committed at that time, and I have to say, Tom Pullis was great about staying on board with this as well. We kind of said we want to do something about this, and so that's how the nexus of this paper started. And as we kind of obviously talked about this with Mile, it made a lot of sense to us. And then just so happened at the same time, we started partnering with AVAYL, and Mina was really such a great driver and her team in kind of bringing us along on this journey, because they really helped us with a lot of energy behind getting this written and really getting this together and giving it a lot of inertia. And last but not least, we brought in Samuel, and it was just such a pleasure to finally be able to collaborate with him on this, just because of his deep expertise. So I think all these different groups, we looked together and said, this will be great because we're going to have a pan-pharmaceutical view on this, and be able to take all these different levels of expertise and take real-life examples from companies that were really brave enough to share their anonymized use cases. So really thank you so much to everybody that has also participated along the way.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Michelle. And over to you, Samuel. Could you introduce the MSL Society and explain how the MSL study that you conducted revealed the gap of knowledge within the organization when it comes to AI?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, good morning, good afternoon, good evening from Miami, Florida, wherever you are in the world. Yeah, absolutely. So I guess first thing I'm going to start by saying is that I'm really excited for being here. And I think for me, the most exciting part is that I never have to work on writing this paper again, that it's out. Just kidding. It took a long time. It was a lot of work. And so I want to say congratulations to the co-authors as well. It was a lot of work, and we obviously hope all of you find it valuable. The MSL Society is what is called in the United States a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We're the only organization dedicated to the global MSL community. Today, we have members in more than 100 countries. Among many of the things that we do as an organization is we conduct a lot of surveys. So we conduct a lot of global surveys on every aspect of field medical. Certainly, one of the hot, sexy, cool topics for field medical, and there's probably very few things we can define as hot, sexy, and cool for MSLs, but this might be one of them, is AI. Everybody's talking about it. I want it, I need it. And then the next question is, what is AI and how do I use it? And so really the driver was we wanted to conduct a global survey to understand the perceptions and usage of AI. So that's what we did. We did a big global survey, the first ever of its kind, about 1,000 MSLs and managers. And frankly, the results were a wide, sort of eye-opening, if you will. And what we saw was that although there was clear potential use and everyone understood it, they didn't understand how to use it. And so really the idea behind the survey was to understand that knowledge gap and what do we do with that knowledge gap. So of course we worked with all of the organizations that you see here represented and these individuals culmination into what we're going to discuss today.
Brilliant, Samuel. Thank you so much. And as you said, that's an interesting experience for the MSLs. They don't normally have a lot of things that are sexy and exciting to deal with. So it's good that we can bring this to them. Mina, over to you now. Can you introduce AVAYL and why you supported this position paper? And what experiences do you currently have when deploying AI across the industry?
Thank you so much, Helen. And it's really a pleasure to be here and to see how many participants we actually have. Yeah, so my name is Mina. I'm the managing director here at AVAYL, and we're a technology provider that is focusing basically on AI technology for medical information and the broader medical affairs teams. And I think like what we realized with our customers is that like I think it's crystal clear that there's a huge opportunity with AI, right? I think like we talked about it, it's a big topic, it's a sexy topic, but we kind of like try to focus on really on the unsexy parts of AI, right? Because we wanted to really understand why is everyone talking about AI, but why are there not so many talking about the big successes and return of invests, right? And I think what we realized that there's a huge stress also in the organizations, right? Because the management expects us to kind of deliver value with AI, but there are very practical questions why often it is so challenging to actually accomplish those goals. So some of those practical challenges are like, yeah, how do we ensure that those AI systems, that we understand what is actually happening in the systems, like overcoming the black box problem? How can we ensure our fragmented data can be connected? How the system communicate with our systems? What are the regulators saying? And what are maybe security standards I have to consider? And what we understood and realized that technology deployment is so much more than just delivering a system and a software, but rather helping basically across the industry, like answering also those very practical questions that are currently a boundary basically to really fully unlock the value of AI. And yeah, it was a huge pleasure. We basically reached out and connected then with the medical information leaders in Europe and also Samuel and the MSL Society. And it was just really great to see also how much energy and basically drive there was to kind of innovate together, but also overcome those challenges that we probably all face within the organizations, within the departments. And that was the main driver where we contributed and why we're so excited about this initiative and also the people behind it and to drive a change together.
Thank you, Mina, and thank you, Michelle and Samuel, for introducing your organisations and explaining how this collaboration came to be and the position paper, which we've now delivered after 8 months of pretty intensive work to get it to this position. So we're delighted. I just want to remind everyone on the phones, you can log your questions, whether you're in the Teams meeting or you're connecting through LinkedIn. We are able to accept any questions. So we're looking forward to getting the first ones in to get the conversation going. But while we're just waiting for those to come in, I'm going to ask Michelle a question around the typical pitfalls of AI projects and to share some insights around the concept of drilling down to what we call the why and why that's so important and the steps that are really required to drive successful projects.
Yeah, I think the brilliant part, as I said, about a lot of the conversations we had at the very beginning of this, and then throughout as we were really kind of engaging across industry to ask everyone, what were they finding were the challenges that they had. We had some meetings, in fact, where we were like, tell us about your epic fails, tell us about what you did well, and really just kind of kept really on a roadshow talking with everybody about what they were encountering. And what we found was that there's kind of, I'll say, four sort of buckets that we've actually encapsulated in a framework, because when we heard it so often, when people really broke down why their projects didn't come to life, we saw, from the very beginning, the drilling down the why, finding out what your problem actually is, was the toughest challenge, because we're all used to our leadership coming in. They are super excited about some AI project, and they're like, just implement this. But we know that it's something that when you have a solution in hand, but you don't know exactly what your problem is, you're at a mismatch, right? And so that was kind of where we first started, because, again, when we looked at the failed projects, from my experience as well, is that the lack of why we're doing this, the real deep understanding of the problem at hand, leads oftentimes to a lot of scope creep. It leads to a lot of issues with the projects running over because we underestimated things. And also it just ends up, projects become a bit of a zombie. And I think everybody probably in this audience has dealt with that, because again, there was no buy-in to this, because something that was implemented wasn't really looked at by the wider group as something that was really necessary, or it doesn't fit very harmoniously into the day-to-day work of people. I think the second bucket that we see that is really, again, a common theme, is that you now understand your problem, but you don't quite do the work to understand the environment that why or that problem is residing within. So this is things like your own team doesn't have the technical skills to be able, for example, to do prompting, to be able to implement generative AI. Your IT department does not have the skills or the infrastructure to be able to integrate that solution. Your data is in absolute state. It's absolutely disastrously organized. And so when you look at those things, those are the things that really are the very time consuming and, the real things that derail a lot of AI projects, as you're trying to, take this idea and find out what's the right potential solution. And again, if, when you get to that kind of solution ideation phase, sometimes, I've really seen this happen where we were convinced we were going to need some automation or some type of other sort of AI to help us move a process along. Our first step we took was looking at, for example, the full process from end to end. And we just said, well, first of all, we don't want to take this bad process and put it into AI or to automate it. We need to first start and get probably 10 of the 20 steps out. And ironically, when we got to the end of that, we were like, well, just now having it at 10 steps is already good enough. And so that's, again, another pitfall that we see. And then the last pit stop, the last area where I see a lot of failure, is you go through all this trouble to do all this work to know why you're going to do this project, what the problems, or what is around the problem. You decide on a solution, but you haven't planned for the longevity or, really for the future of this project. So you've done a pilot, but that's the very beginning. You now need to expand it globally. You need to expand it to different users. And long story short, the budget cycles are short. And if you don't have that use case and that strength of vision with this project 2 to 3 years down the road, it again will end up failing later at that stage. And it also starts to fatigue your wider organization. So not the most brief answer, but unfortunately it's not the briefest answer, but that's why we put spent some time in the paper discussing this and putting a framework together for people if they're going to think about implementing AI to be able to do this exercise.
Michelle, I think you're right. I think having that framework is crucial, because it really does give people a structured way of where to start, because a lot of people don't even know where to begin. So to have a concise framework, 4 steps, really does make it user friendly. So it's really helpful. Samuel, I'm going to pass over to you now, and ask you, really, how do you see we can build the capabilities to harness the power of AI for the MSLs?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think a question that increasingly teams are struggling with and trying to find answers to. So look, my perspective is that AI will not replace MSLs, or at least it's our responsibility to ensure that that doesn't happen. But I do think that AI could and can be used to elevate the role by enhancing things like data-driven engagements and things like strategic decision making, right? So you think about MSLs at the core of what we are. We're science nerds. We're data-driven, right? Everybody in medical affairs are all nerds. Sorry, if you're on this call, you probably are too, right? Big hint. But anyway, but in seriousness, I mean, this becomes a really important thing on how we're going to use it, because AI is actually really kind of an agent, right? It kind of thinks for itself. So we got to make sure that we are able to harness that. But I think also the other thing, there's a lot of fear from that we're perceiving from MSLs. And look, MSLs do not need to be AI experts, right? But they need to be AI literate. So that means understanding how AI processes data and generates insights and identifies trends. All of those things become really important. I think the other part of this capability and harnessing this is training is essential, right? And so what we think about is companies that are going to invest in AI education programs that are specific to the needs of field medical, or more broadly, medical affairs. I also think that AI, whatever tool you use, can help us prioritize KOL and HCP interactions, right? And so we think about making sure that engagements are more personalized and meeting the needs. And of course, one of the things I always say about MSLs, every MSL should go into every single interaction. I don't care if it's a 2-minute engagement or 1 hour with PowerPoint slides. Every single engagement should be relentlessly focused on adding value. And so AI can actually help us do that. But I also think that MSLs proactively adopting AI tools for things like, literature reviews and scientific analysis, those kind of things, becomes really important. And then the last thing I think that is important cornerstone of all of this is companies need to adopt a AI inclusive and adoption culture, right? And part of that is going to be empowering not only our MSLs and field medical to be empowered, but also simultaneously not threatened by the technology, right? So they're going to take our jobs, that kind of thing. But that also means that there's a lack of this based on the data and the survey that we did. There's currently a lack of policies in place. And so can I use AI? What tool can I use? How can I use it? So on and so forth. So I think those are probably the cornerstones of thinking about what is that capability model look like and how do we harness that?
Brilliant. Thank you, Samuel. And as an ex-MSL, I'm a nerd as well, so I fully embrace that title. We have a question from Megan, and she said, can you give a real-world example of how AI has been implemented into the field, Samuel?
Yeah, absolutely. The largest source of revenue for the MSL Society is training MSL teams. So we've now worked with about 75 pharma companies in 20 countries. We do it a lot. And increasingly, certainly over the last 18 months, we've had more and more requests to do integrating AI and how to use that. Now, 99.5%, there might be some exception, but I'm not aware of it. These are going to be internally developed AI systems. So they're not letting people go out on ChatGPT and just, dump our PI in there and our proprietary information, because that's one of the concerns, of course, of using AI. But one of the things that one company that we just worked with is creating an annual KOL engagement plan and prioritizing KOLs based on where we're at currently in that product lifecycle. Interestingly, which I found pretty interesting about that particular use case, that was actually for an orphan drug MSL team, which presumably you would think, well, do I really need this for a situation like this where there's very few KOLs. It's not like a Me Too product where I'm one of 14 out there on the market, right? Where I kind of know who the KOLs are, but what they wanted was a very, very specific approach and how to prioritize these KOLs. And incidentally, one more detail that I think is important here. The team was brand new, not new to the profession, but new to the company. So they wanted to get it right.
Absolutely brilliant, Samuel. Thank you so much for that. I hope that answers your question, Megan. Obviously, please keep putting questions in to the chat as we go through. We have another question, and I think Michelle and Mina, you both can answer this one. This one is from Ana Paula Soares do Prado, excuse my pronunciation. In the context of medical information in the pharmaceutical industry, can AI assist us in writing medical letters, or could it require more time for a double check due to the require for humans to look at it as well? So, Michelle, do you want to go first? Because you obviously.
Well, I'll actually let Mina kick it off because I think they're creating a tool on this, and then I want to talk about the user experience on our end because I think that's probably what Anna wants to know especially. Go ahead, Mina.
Thanks so much, Michelle. Yeah, I mean, I love this question because obviously we are obsessed with medical information. We've spent so much time on understanding what are the challenges and also how to overcome them. So thanks for asking actually that question. So you are fully right. Like, I think like with like standard, like what we've seen, like we all love large language model and the capabilities to rephrase content or to translate and so on. Then the next generation of AI tools that was out there and also large pharmaceutical companies even build themselves is like combining the capabilities of a large language model with basically data, like for example, study data. You're fully right. The biggest challenge of those systems is that you can overcome like quite significantly the problem of hallucination. So you get quite accurate outcome. But there's a different problem. As you rightly said, we have to spend now a lot of time on understanding how was this generated, where are the studies coming from, which parts of the studies were taken, were they basically written in the right form. And that was exactly what also we have seen. And we realized that's not really great because it's good enough to impress your management, but it's not good enough to impress the user because instead of doing the research yourself and following scientific core principles, understanding what you're actually doing, you spend then a lot of time on understanding where this information, how this has been pulled together by AI. And that was also one important learning for us, because what we realized is that in reality, if you think about your own workflows, for example, in medical information, but actually across medical affairs, in reality, it's not that you ask a question and get a response. That's just one step. In reality, you kind of explore which sources are out there. You kind of have to balance, is this a publication that comes from a prestigious journal or not? Is this a case study or a review? Like there are so many questions that you have to ask yourself to evaluate if this content is really meaningful or not, that you kind of lose this a bit in a one-step approach. So to overcome this, basically the next generation of AI services, what they have to deliver is basically like break down basically those workflow steps into mini micro steps. And what do I mean with that? Like a system should help you basically not just to create a response, but actually help you to guide through the whole process. Like it should help you basically doing research on the content that you have available in your content systems, for example, in-house, or like data that is currently in the library of your copyright protected service provider who's delivering studies, and then PubMed and Embase and all the other sources that you use. It should help you to assess the content faster. It should help you to extract the information and then put it together in a way that you understand how to basically, you came to a response and answer. Therefore, like our conviction is, and that's a bit like a maybe bold statement, but our conviction is that chatbots are just the first generation of AI systems, and we don't believe that they will survive for a long time. We believe that chat is just a feature, but a product should deliver you more. It should basically help you along the workflow understand basically what you are developing and how you create content, so that you don't need to kind of just need to understand the final step, but rather are in between of those steps in full control. And that means if you spend naturally, let's say, a few hours or days, this should reduce your workload to maybe like an hour or so, but it's still better than if you kind of just want to have a response in a second, but you don't understand how this was created created, right? Because that doesn't follow scientific principle and will be also difficult to explain in your next audit how this was created. So that's a bit our opinion on that. Yes, it is possible, but it requires basically breaking down the workflow steps and put you in the driver's seat and control to understand what's happening, and then you can get really fully the power. But happy to also share or hand over back to Michelle so she can elaborate on that.
Well, yeah, and I'd say from the end user perspective, firstly, my top tip would be if you're going to go down this path, whether you use something like AVAYL or you go with some other solution, is that you really do have to understand where you want, like where your problem area is. Is it the generation of the actual information itself, like to create the first letter? Is it the literature searching? Is it the review process? And it might be all three, don't get me wrong, but you might say, which one do we want to kind of try first? But when we went into this project, because we're doing this now at Recordati, we create the letters, and because we had this concern, again, like we spent all this time having these skills, learning how to do critical appraisals of content. And you don't lose that when you're using a tool that's been built correctly. So in this case, when we do a literature search, we're still using all those skills we have. And then the output is then the literature we would expect to see whether we were completely outside the system. The next step, though, is then digging into that data, which Amina touched on that as well, is like, I still need from a critical perspective to say, what is the hierarchy of evidence, right? So I'm not going to prioritize all case studies over maybe a good RCT or a meta-analysis that's been well done. And so you still have that ability to drill down further to help you with shaping then the information that you're going to pull through with the AI. So it's truly acting more as an assistant. And I think that what we found too is, and I think everybody who's in MedInfo, even MSLs, they know this too. We're going in and out of so many different systems to document here, document there, find something here, and they're all disparate systems. What we're finding, and we've been pushing AVAYL very hard, and I don't care what vendor I'd be working with, I'd be pushing them just as hard, is they need to work like, the tool needs to work like us, which means if you can keep my team in the tool when they're doing lit searches, so that means that we can connect our Embase connector to the system, that we can get the copyright checked right there and then, and that we have the access to the full publication, not just an abstract, and then can you also ensure that all my templates are there and that all my standard content is there and that I upload whatever data that I want in there to serve as my robust baseline. And so it's very mindful, and I'm not going to pretend like it's been a simple exercise. We're now about 3 months into our pilot, and we're always changing things every day. And the beauty is our vendor is sitting with us and looking how we actually work. And we're creatures of habit. So the way we work with our Word program is we have a certain sort of the way we maneuver and what we're used to, right clicking and control functions and things like this. And so they kind of watched us and said, whoa, we didn't think you did that. Okay, we need to think about this. And so as you iterate the solution you get to, you also have to think about how people would really work. So it's not that the first minute you get the program and you implement it, it's perfect. There's a lot of iteration that we've had as well during the pilot phase, but it's been critically important that our way of working has been considered, and that it's intuitive to what we do, and it pulls together all of our internal resources to give us a much stronger solution for content generation. And this is the same as well for the MSLs. We're piloting this with them as well, for them to be able to research things for their doctors. So it's one step at a time, and we are there. We're very comfortable now with it writing the letters, but we're double checking them, and it's actually easier now because everything is completely pulled over as a reference, so we can easily see it right next to it. And we also see it highlights where it took the information from in the paper. So this is really, again, if anybody uses Viva, I love the system, but there's a lot of steps to it. It's very difficult in that review phase to say, what is the source data of this information, and being able to dig in that document. So there's, again, that intuitiveness to the process that has been very helpful for us.
Amazing. Thank you both for the answer to that question. I hope that Anna gives you reassurance that it does help expedite the process, but the humans are still involved. Samuel, can I come back to you? We've had a question. Can you provide any examples of the use of AI to analyze field medical insights? Yet another big buzzword up there, you analyzing insights. Do you have an example that you're able to share with us?
Untold number.
Let's go for one. You come back if we've got more time.
Yeah, we need a lot more time for this.
Yeah.
I think in general, AI, there are a lot of tools. There's a lot of vendors. I tell you to Google search them. There's a lot of tools and vendors out there that are designed on AI platforms to analyze insights. Insights, probably, again, to use the term hot, sexy, cool, this is probably the hot topic for MSLs globally. And in fact, it's by far the most requested training topic we get. So there are tools out there to help analyze, but I think it's exactly what both Mina and Michelle have already highlighted. These tools can be awesome. At the end of the day, you need a pair of human eyes. You need some oversight, human oversight. So regardless of the tool that you guys are thinking about, whoever asked that question, I didn't catch the name, but if you're thinking about, AI can help. It will not replace, because it makes mistakes and it doesn't know. And the other thing is also, one more thing here, specific to this, it's always going to come down to junk in and junk out. You put in junk variables or junk information, what will be analyzed and spit out will be more junk. So that would be the thing I would tell you to be really careful of.
Yeah. And I think with the insights as well, I think what is an exciting evolution is everyone talks about the insights from the MSLs. We also, from medical information, are looking at insights. It's bringing those two together as well, because we're both customer facing departments within the company. So to bring those insights together and analyze them using the appropriate AI technology will have a massive impact to the business strategy when we can, understand the true sentiments that the doctors are conveying about whatever the key insight is. So we look forward to kind of seeing that combined as well moving forward. Michelle, you were going to say something?
No, I was going to piggyback on Samuel's comment, because I've done a couple of these projects with MSLs with MedInfo, and I think these combined dashboards are field, it's field, basically information from both functions. And one thing I've learned, and it's a very important point, is that a lot of our MSLs are just capturing data. And when we talk about insights, we actually, and I think probably Sammy, you have a course on this, but like we had to go back and say, guys, this is actually what an insight is. And so we had a cleaner, sort of more consistent input into that field for the insights, so that we weren't also getting a lot of junk information in there. And even with MedInfo, we went back and said, we need to code our cases differently and fill in the free text box a little bit differently, with a little bit more rigor and a little bit more structure. And so that was something else that we found that really drastically improved the outputs that we had. And of course, we had some of the tools we have what are called ontologies, or buckets of things we wanted to look at. And we were very transparent with the users. Like, if it's something that's in this ontology, make sure to use that term. So maybe it's like hesitancy to prescribe, or, something of that nature. We would prioritize that as well, again, to like try and help people understand, even what are our key questions, what are the key insights we're looking for. And then some are just completely happenstance, because the data naturally will bubble up some insight we didn't have before.
Perfect. Awesome. The next question, Mina, I want to come to you actually. We're talking about typical barriers against implementing AI. And actually, we've had two questions in the chat asking what the biggest hurdles or barriers are to implementation and how it could be overcome. And Gonzalo specifically pulled out data privacy compliance and regulatory hurdles. So if you can cover the key barriers but address those regulatory frameworks as well, would be great.
Right. Yeah, I think, like, first of all, like when we think about like what is our key responsibility, I mean, we have responsibility towards doctors and patients, right? Like, we have a very, very important responsibility when it comes to medical information. Like, we are in a world where so information is created so fast and amongst the internet, right? Like, from many different stakeholders, and then like patients and doctors receiving information from everywhere. Our biggest responsibility is to make sure we have accurate information and basically also disseminate this in an appropriate way, right? And I think the consequences of this is obviously that we are a very risk-averse industry, right? Like we have to ensure that we follow regulations, we have GXP processes, we have to stay compliant with, we have to follow scientific principles. And that also explains the nature of why we have maybe challenges that other industries don't have, right? I think there are general challenges that everyone faces, like hallucination and problems of AI. But I think there's no other industry that has such a big responsibility when it comes to correct and transparent information, right? Like in medical information or medical affairs as a whole. So therefore, I think that the barriers are exactly like basically a result from that. So I think like what we've seen when we look at the EU AI Act, or we look at what the FDA or EMA says, right? There are concepts of human in the loop and how you kind of assess technology. But to be honest, like if you read this, it's kind of like, what does it even mean, human in the loop, right? Like how deep should the human be in the loop, and what is deep enough and what is too loose, right? So I guess like there are very practical questions why it is so challenging for the companies that they don't have maybe detailed SOPs, because how do you want to define how SOPs should look like if you don't like fully understand and don't have maybe yet also the capabilities to assess, right? And I think that this is something where we try to also help basically with our company at AVAYL, where we say, let's kind of build the capabilities together and understand what are the frameworks that are out there and what is really relevant to achieve this next level of transparency and security as well, right? So make it a bit more practical. Like when we talk, I think someone asked about how can you make sure your data remains your same, right? I think it starts like when you have technology, like let's say just MS Teams, and we're having SharePoint and we upload our materials on SharePoint, right? It needs to stay our SharePoint and shouldn't be basically distributed to other companies. But what happens if you kind of like access or have access to AI systems? So there are natural questions that needs to be solved. And we believe that hopefully the position paper is one step towards this goal to kind of create more clarity, but at the same time also working together within the industry to overcome those challenges of regulation and following scientific principles. And I think the very first step is creating actually transparency and also solutions to that.
Awesome. I think Mina, you said that obviously medical affairs and pharma is so highly regulated. One of the questions that we had, again from Megan, thank you, Megan, is do the principles of AI differ in medical affairs and other industries? If so, how? And if not, what can we learn from them? Are we more robust than anyone else so they can learn from us?
I definitely think so, because like if you, for example, think about you are working, let's say in a creative industry, right? Where like AI is so amazing when it comes to kind of hallucination can also be a benefit, right? Imagine you're working in a creative industry where you want to create creative content, right? That's a big plus. In our industry, we don't want to have any creativity to outcomes, right? So I think like for us, it's very important that information comes reliable, but also following scientific principle, for example, repetitive, right? Like you can't ask a question and next time I get a different response. So I think like having repetitive, the same output, having accurate output, and making sure that also like that I understand how this was picked up. Those are very scientific principles I have to follow, and I need to make sure that everything I create is auditable. Someone can understand how was this generated, right? So I guess like we have unique responsibilities, and also like basically where systems have to follow your flow. So it's not enough to just create an agent to kind of connect with your system, because you will never get to the point where you can say, hey, this communicates perfectly to my systems in a way that I fully understand how this was generated. So yes, I believe that there are some significant differences to other industries. We can definitely also learn from other industries, but I believe we also have to, amongst our industry, basically come up with our needs and questions that we have to address in a different way to kind of really unlock the full value and potential also of AI.
Amazing. Thank
And I
you.
think the other thing is too, Helen, is we're laggards, right? We're not we're not at the front of the technology, like, but that's okay, because I've learned the most from seeing what other industries can do. So I was at a conference for call centers, for example, and I was looking at a bunch of vendors. Like I was there with IKEA and with some, big sort of banking companies, insurance, and what they could do, because they also have a risk sort of strategy. Some of it's to like, what's a high value activity? And that's actually how we should think. what's a high value activity? It's not like doing documentation and bogged down with administrative work. The high value activity is us being humans with our customers when they need us to be. And so I actually learned a lot from what they were doing, even though we couldn't do some of it because we had to have full control of, you know, when they pushed them, for example, to a voice chatbot or to a physical chatbot. They had a lot of safety, right? Because they knew exactly what they could put in that space, but they still gave them the option to go back to somebody to speak to live. So I think we can learn a lot from them. We cannot do everything they can, but we at least can be inspired and say, how can we get there? So I think we can learn a lot from other industries in that regard.
So talking about learning, one of the questions we had from Henry, and I know, Michelle, you've made a few comments. Are there any courses one can take to learn more on AI applications and stay ahead? Because obviously the technology is changing all the time.
Yeah.
Is anyone aware of any courses that they could
Samuel,
recommend?
you guys doing it? Are you doing it yet in MSLS?
We are developing one. It's not out yet. It will be specific to MSLs, but there's a lot of stuff out there. I guess I would only say that be careful of the source of the information, right? Make sure it's up to date. But the other thing is, obviously everybody on this call is well aware of this. Whatever you do, make sure that you're compliant and it's in line with the company SOPs and policies. So that's what I would tell you. We are developing one that will be rolled out soon, though, for MSLs.
Amazing. We'll make sure.
Yeah, and maybe also
that.
and from our side, we do this obviously on medical information. Like, I think like what we kind of saw across the industry, that I think like one thing is testing and deploying services, but the other part is actually having literally like courses on understanding what are the regulations and what is happening basically in the environment and what are also different AI systems. So we on our side do this, but particularly for medical information. And I think also maybe moving forward, I think that is also something where we obviously hear with this, as like basically this team of people that have been behind this position paper, we are obviously happy also to kind of like collaborate on this and see what we can do moving forward, right? I think like at the end of the day, like I think like what our goal is, everything that helps here the audience and the participants to kind of learn more about AI and to kind of also deploy it in a safe and impactful way. Let us know. I think like at the end, we also have a little poll where we want to ask you what would be most meaningful, but I guess that's also something we can always look into and see how we can best help.
And I think also to add to that, like, I think Mina's kind of made it clear, like as a technical partner, they're always doing their research to stay up with what's going on. The reality, guys, and someone always asks us the question, is AI going to replace humans? And I know probably you've heard this before, but it's humans that refuse to adopt and learn AI are the ones that are going to unfortunately probably suffer a bit in the market. And so it is a lifelong learning activity from here on out. This is our new normal. And that's why also we've decided with this position paper is to leave it a bit as a living, breathing document. And so that we will continue to look at this and update it, because we put even a little bit of a primer on some of the regulations and some other principles that very rightly we've been given the feedback, those change. And we're like, yes, they do. And that's why we will continue to kind of keep publishing information about this. And also we're continuously taking in different use cases. Again, epic fails and epic wins, great projects. So I think it is something like I gave some recommendations, the massive online courses, there are brilliant programs on there and you can get them. I got a certificate from IBM, I think for $50. And it was a very good course. There were moments where I was a little bit over my head, but I was like, it's good, you know, knuckle down and learn a bit. But there are many, many courses that are on there and they're in multiple languages. So if English is not your favorite, you know, to learn in, then I think I've seen in Spanish, French, and German, certainly. And then Chinese I've seen as well. I don't read Chinese, but I know it's Chinese.
Maybe this is a next revision, is to provide links to reputable training sources for people that want to learn more about the tool. So that's a great suggestion. Michelle, in your comment then, you obviously, and it's been mentioned a few times about humans being replaced by AI, which we all agree isn't going to happen, but people are still worried about their positions. Would someone like to comment on kind of best practices to engage colleagues from the outset with bringing AI technology on board to help, you know, alleviate those concerns they have about, you know, I'm going to bring this technology in and then they're going to get rid of me? Do someone want to comment? Because I know we had mentioned it in the paper.
Well, I'm going to comment first, and I think
Yeah.
because Samuel's going to have some great info on this, but Mina and I were at Google last week in Berlin, or 2 weeks ago in Berlin, and we saw a presentation about, they were completely technical guys, but their whole approach as a consulting group was to help with the coaching and the training. And I think the first step to getting people to adopt the technology is just like any good large project management, sort of endeavor. It's get the people on your side. What you think is a good amount of communication, multiply that by about 100, because that's probably what you actually need. And then whilst you're in the process, constantly coaching people and really getting them comfortable, understanding, helping them even critique, like, where do they think that the technology should be in there? Because I'm in global functions, we screw this up all the time. We constantly drop projects on the global, like from a global perspective, on our affiliates, and they don't adopt it because they're like, I was never a part of this. This is not how I work. So again, that was always been my biggest learning. Get them involved early and then coach them constantly through it. And then make sure you have coaching after that. There's an evolution of that, and constantly supporting them. And I think, Samuel, you guys are thriving on this. You see probably the same people coming back to your group because you have relevant training as you go.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's a great point that you raise, Michelle, is, being aware of it, being comfortable, how the tools can be utilized. I think shockingly and maybe startlingly, from the survey that we did, we asked, and this survey included, again, about 1,000 MSLs, managers, and executives. We asked this question: how would you rate your overall awareness of the concepts of AI and AI tools? Only 18% of respondents said knowledgeable or very knowledgeable. I mean, think about that. 18%. And yet we're saying AI is everywhere. It is, but we don't really understand it. And another question I thought was really profound and enlightening was, we asked this question: do you perceive AI as a threat to your role? And interestingly, 64% said no. But that kind of contradicts, well, no, I don't see it as a threat. Well, how familiar are you with it? 18%. I don't really know what it is, but it's not a threat. So I agree, it's not a threat, but I think at the same time, we need to understand what it can and can't do and best use cases for it. So I think it really goes back to, again, as I mentioned, having appropriate policies and trainings in place, how we're going to use it, what are the use cases, and how is it going to specifically help me and support the KOLs that I'm going out and engaging with.
And maybe if I can add maybe from my side to this question, like also like, how do we see this? Like, I mean, first of all, like everything we do, we always keep the human in the loop because we believe this is so critical. Like not only, okay, nice to have, but we actually believe that it's so important with the medical expert. There are such important decisions to be taken that obviously you want to always keep an expert. But I think like what naturally will happen is that probably the medical information output will be different in the future, right? Like if we kind of think of, probably no one is here bored because we don't have enough work, right? I think like everyone has limited budgets. Our inquiry volumes maybe naturally increase, right? And the way how we see this, if we basically get today like tons of inquiries that we have to handle and where we spend a lot of time, if we could reduce this time, what does it even offer us, right? Because first of all, we would like to kind of be the single source where basically patients and doctors come to and kind of ask their questions. And if we can do this in a time that basically starts competing with completely different sources. And I love what Michelle is always saying there. We're not competing amongst each other. It's like, how can we actually compete with social media and content that is out there? I think that's an exciting future. Like, how can we basically create faster, accurate information and also do this in a way that we can actually tailor information much more? Like if you think about, for example, in medical information, creating standard response documents, that's an activity that we take not because we believe it's better, but because it's more efficient than actually customizing each individual response, right? But if we could do in the future, do this in the same accuracy and quality level, but faster, then we could maybe actually also use the time to customize, to create more content for self-service portals, to reach out to our patients and doctors and proactively actually deliver the best service level we could. So we believe it's actually a very exciting future, which which has also to be driven within the industry, right? Because the big questions of what we want to deliver, they don't change, but the technology to get us there, this is actually changing. But we believe it only works with basically the medical experts and driven by the medical experts, why it's so important to build also the capabilities to decide which direction we actually want to go together.
Thank you so much. We're running out of time. We could probably go on for another hour with the amount of questions that would come in. But in the last minute or so, does someone want to make a quick comment? We've had this a couple of times in terms of how we define success or return on investment for an AI project.
So, I mean, yeah, I think for me, we firstly in medical information, and actually, and Samuel could talk about MSL, numbers, like we do have clear KPIs. We know what good looks like at the end of the day. And so for me, I don't care if it's a human being that gets me to good KPIs or if it's enhanced with AI. I think that's number one to say, we're hitting those customer service levels, we're hitting the KOLs, we're moving the needle on science. Those are part of things. But as far as like the success of the project, you need to ask your team, their satisfaction level with the project. How is it going? I know a lot of project managers do this, like, how is it going every, few sprints that they do on a project. But I also think that, again, the success would be for me in some of my organizations has been, I've been able to keep my headcount flat because I've been able to successfully bring in technology with the resource I have. And so that, there's different KPIs that are going to depend on what your company is asking from you, but also what does good look like in your function. So there's no one size fits all. It's, you have to tailor it to what do you want good to look like once you've put AI into that process so that you can illustrate to the business that this was a good investment and to maintain it, because that's the most important part afterwards.
Samuel, comment?
Yeah, look, I would certainly support what Michelle said. I think part of that is having clear goals and objectives that are strategically aligned from an MSL's perspective, to the KOLs and HCPs that you're supporting that are absolutely supporting and aligned with the medical strategy for the product you're supporting. And what I mean by that is, it's like going out and buying a cool CRM that looks fantastic on your laptop that no one actually ever uses. And so if I'm going to go out and invest in these tools, and I'm going to go out and try to incorporate this into my workflow, then actually knowing how to use them, how they can support me, and how they are actually should be utilized, that actually helps me meet that goal. Because anything else is just simply an investment of money, but doesn't really make me more effective in my profession. Because we know today, the biggest challenge that MSLs are facing globally is this dirty A word that nobody wants to talk about: access to KOLs. And so if AI will help me increase my access, be more productive, and when I am in with having an engagement with a KOL, deliver the most value, that's what I should be focusing on and thinking about ROI.
Samuel, thank you so much for that final comment. I'm afraid we are running out of time. So we are going to launch a quick poll if you want to type in there. In the Q&A section, you will find the links to download the position paper if you've not had a chance to do that yet, and have a look. Please get in contact with us if you have feedback on the content of the position paper. As Michelle said, it's a living, breathing document. We intend to update it as regulations change, as technology changes, and hopefully you will see it as your go-to document for implementing AI within medical affairs. So I want to thank the panelists today for their time and answering all the questions. Apologies if we didn't get to your questions. We had so many coming through on the Q&A. Just shows what an important topic this is. And I'm delighted that we were all able to get together and we can all be AI enthusiasts implementing successful products within medical affairs as we move forward. So Thank you so much, and we hope to speak to you again when the next edition comes out. So enjoy the rest of your afternoon or morning, depending where you are in the world, and hopefully speak to you again. Take care, everyone, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.